Welcome back, Daisy Cakes. We are continuing my list of top 100 fantasy authors, and this is part 3. Why have I compiled this list? Because I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I'm also doing a list of top 100 science fiction authors, so keep an eye out for those videos. These lists include authors who write adult books and those who write children's books. Some authors are contemporary and some are pioneers. The list is in alphabetical order, and today we are starting with Trudi Canavan, who was born in 1969 and is from Down Under. Yes, she's an Australian fantasy author. I started reading her back when her debut came out in 2001, titled The Magician's Guild. This is the first book in the Black Magicians trilogy, and is a book I suggest you start with because it is so good. It is set in the city of Emeridin, which is protected by magic, but magic is strictly controlled by the Magician's Guild. Sonia is a young girl who lives in the slums, and she finds out she has magic when she is with a gang throwing stones at a group of magicians who are protected by a magic shield, so the stones don't bother them, but the stone that Sonia throws breaks the shield. She is then hunted by the guild, and she goes deep into the dark underbelly of the city to hide from them. Now, this trilogy has lots of twists and turns, and at least the first book is a coming-of-age story. After that, she grows up a bit. Canavan has written several other series that I really like, especially The Age of 5, which is a trilogy that starts with The Priestess of the White, published in 2005. Her latest series, Millennium's Rule, starts with Thief's Magic, published in 2014. And it's a very, very strange and ambitious planet-hopping high fantasy series with 2 POV characters who almost never meet. It's very unusual. But for those who like traditional fantasy, I think you'll love Trudi Canavan's Black Magician trilogy. I don't often talk about sexy novels, but now I have to because our next author is Jacqueline Carey. Born in 1964, Carey's debut novel cannot be ignored. That novel is Crucial's Dart, published in 2001. It is the first novel in the Crucial's Legacy series, and warning, 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 it is very adult when it deals with sexuality. The story takes place in a fictional kingdom inspired by France called Terre d'Ange, which embraces all forms of sexuality, and their precept is, love as thou wilt. The main character, Phaedre, was born with a red fleck in her eye, which means she is marked by the angel Nama, and also means she experiences pleasure from pain. Phaedra eventually becomes a sacred prostitute, of which there are many, both male and female, but she is particularly sought after by those with a sadistic bent. And when she finds out about a plot against the kingdom, the story really takes off. I know this is sounding really X-rated and crazy, but trust me, the writing is so elevated you will be enthralled, unless you are a prude and aren't open to alternate sexual lifestyles, in which case, stay away from these books. But if not, definitely check out Crucial's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. I am so excited to now talk about Gail Carriger, maybe the only steampunk author worth reading. Gail Carriger was born in 1976 and came to fame with her debut novel, Soulless, published in 2009. You have to read Soulless. I am telling you, just do it. Personally, before Carriger, as much as I admired the aesthetic of steampunk, I never really found a book that I thought was that good and kind of wrote off the subgenre as not for me. But then I picked up Soulless. This is set in an alternate history version of Victorian London where vampires and werewolves exist, and also a supernatural type called the Soulless who can temporarily negate vampirism and lycanthropy by touch. That's who our main character is, Alexia Terabati, who accidentally kills a vampire while nipping off from a ball to find a treacle tart. The writing is so funny and full of personality, and if you're anything like me, you'll immediately fall in love. Yes, this also probably falls under the category of paranormal romance when the handsome werewolf Lord Macon enters the scene, but even if you're not into romance, I beg you to give this a try. I don't often reread books, but this is one I have simply because it makes me smile and feel so good every time I read it. We're staying in Victorian London because our next author is Lewis Carroll, who allegedly was one of Queen Victoria's favorite authors. Born in 1932, Charles Dodgson published under the pen name Lewis Carroll, and the book you all know and love, which has become ingrained in our culture, is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, published in 1865. His mentor was fantasy author George MacDonald, who greatly inspired another Lewis, C.S. Lewis. Anyway, the first draft was originally titled Alice's Adventure Underground, which Lewis Carroll illustrated himself, but he wasn't that good of an artist, so was convinced to hire John Tenniel to reinterpret his drawings, which are the classic, amazing drawings you are familiar with. Most Alice in Wonderland books now are comprised of both Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and the sequel, Alice Through the Looking Glass. These books are full of puns and parodies and use of nonsense words. Carroll was also a mathematician and embedded several references to mathematical concepts into the story. In fact, one interpretation is that the entire first book is a satire of 19th century mathematics. Now, there is a dark side to Wonderland, as it's been suggested that Carroll had unsavory desires for his inspiration, 11-year-old Alice Liddell, based on his taking nude photographs of young women. If you want to find out more, you're welcome to go down that rabbit hole. But as far as I can tell, it's 90% speculation. And for me, Alice in Wonderland is one of the touchstones of fantasy literature. Our next author is S.A. Chakraborty, born in 1985, whose debut novel, The City of Brass, published in 2017, is the first novel in the Daevabad trilogy and was nominated for a host of awards for good reason. It is great storytelling inspired by Middle East mythology and a Muslim culture. Boy, if you're looking for non-Western fantasy, you can't go wrong with The City of Brass, which is set in 18th century Cairo, where we find our main character, Nari, a woman who fakes fortune-telling to swindle people and runs some scams where she pretends to heal people, but sometimes she doesn't pretend. She actually heals people. When she accidentally summons a djinn named Dara, he recognizes that she has djinn blood and whisks her off to Daevabad, also known as the City of Brass, and as all good D&D players know, is the capital city of the jinn. There she is thrust into deadly politics and runs head-on against one of the princes of Daevabad, a devout Muslim named Ali. Yes, I think this could be called a romantasy, and I usually am not into romantasies, but there are always exceptions, and City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty is one of them. I just recently discovered this next author, recently like a few months ago, and that is Yangsze Choo, born in the Philippines of Malaysian Chinese descent. But Her debut novel, The Ghost Bride, was published in 2013 and became a Netflix series. Her second novel, The Night Tiger, was published in 2019 to critical acclaim. She is one of the few authors who narrated her own audiobook, which was nominated for the Audie Award for Literary Fiction. But I haven't read those two books yet. I found her when I picked up her third novel, The Foxwife, published in 2024, earlier this year. I immediately fell in love with the story, told from two points of view: the eponymous supernatural foxwoman named Snow, who is seeking vengeance for her dead son, and an old detective named Bao, who takes on one last case to find out why a woman froze to death in the snow with a smile on her face. One of my favorite books of the year, literary, deep and full of layers. Check out The Foxwife by Yangsze Choo. I may surprise you all by this next author, who is known for her contemporary YA romances, and that's Cassandra Clare, born in 1973, who came to fame with City of Bones, published in 2007, the first in the Mortal Instrument series. I picked this up because I wanted to know what was all the fuss about these books, and now I get it. It's simply fun, supernatural fantasy romance, which was better written than Twilight, in my humble opinion. Don't come for me. The story is about a teenage girl named Clary who sees people that others don't see. And when her mother is kidnapped, she finds out she was born a shadow hunter, someone born to hunt demons. This is absolute pure popcorn fluff, and I think a super fun read. I also recognize it is probably not ultimately a book meant for me, not my cup of tea, but hey, I read the first 3 books, which I think is a complete series. There are more books after that, but I think you could get away just reading those 3. For me, Cassandra Clare is a YA fantasy author that deserves respect. Certainly, she has my respect for creating a world beloved by so many readers. Our next author, Susanna Clark, born in 1959, has only written 2 novels, but what novels they are! The first is my favorite of the 2, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, published in 2004, which was nominated for all the awards, won the Hugo and the Man Book Award, and was named Time's Best Novel of the Year. This is a chunky book, almost 800 pages, and filled with footnotes. The writing is literary, gothic, dense, so it probably isn't for everyone. Maybe read the first chapter to make sure it's for you, but if it is, you're in for a treat. The story is an alternate history novel of 19th century England where magic exists, but magic is super rare and almost never actually is used, just studied by scholars. That is until one of the most notable scholars, Mr. Norrell, wants to revive the actual practice of respectable magic. But then a young upstart comes on the scene named Jonathan Strange, who is not afraid to use magic. The 2 figures are destined to meet as enemies, as friends. Their world is next to the world of the Fae, led by the Raven King, and the backdrop is the Napoleonic Wars, which are threatening all of England. Clark's second novel, Piranesi, is a much different and shorter epistolary novel with an unreliable narrator. Basically, it's the diary of a man who lives in a dimension that is just one big house with no other inhabitants. Piranesi is a very interesting and unique book to read, but in my opinion, it's nowhere near as momentous as Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I view as a masterpiece. I am a little pissed off at this next author, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but I am referring to James Clemens. That's the pen name of an author who is much better known by another pen name, James Rollins. He was born in 1961, and like I said, he is much, much more famous under the name James Rollins for his thriller action-adventure novels, and those novels sell very, very well. Obviously, he also loves high fantasy because he wrote the series The Banned and the Banished under the name James Clemens. Now, this 5-book series starts with Witchfire, published in 1998. I loved the entire series. It's about a girl named Elena who is born with powers that may challenge the Dark Lord, and she sets off on a quest surrounded by a motley crew of outcasts. And I know it sounds like a typical tropey, chosen one fantasy story, and it is. But it is so well written and plotted, I could not put the series down. It is dark, disturbing. Elena is a main character you can't help but fall in love with, and you really find yourself worried about her when she gets into situations that are really difficult to get out of. This is so good. I can't recommend it enough to anyone who likes epic fantasy. And that's the only thing I can recommend by James Clemens because it's the only series he completed. He started another fantasy series called the God Slayer series. There's 2 books out, one published in 2005 and one in 2006. I, of course, got them. I really got into them, and it ends on a cliffhanger, and there's never going to be another one published. The series was abandoned. That's why I was so pissed off at James Clemens. I think it could have been up there with Brandon Sanderson. He's that good, but he stopped. Obviously, something happened with him and the publisher. I don't know quite what. And obviously, he can make much more money publishing thrillers as James Rowland, so I can't really fault him for it, but damn it, I can't help but be angry for what could have been. Okay, the last author for this segment is Alan Cole. Now, this gets a little dicey because the series I'm recommending was written by a collaboration between Alan Cole and Chris Bunch. But I decided to list it under Alan Cole simply because Cole lived longer and wrote the last novel in the series I want to talk about. They were both born in 1943. Bunch died in 2005 at the age of 61, while Cole died in 2019 at the age of 75. And interestingly enough, they were related by marriage. Cole married Chris Bunch's sister. Anyway, they collaborated on a very long-running science fiction series called the Sten Chronicles, but my favorite is their fantasy series of Anteros. The first novel is The Far Kingdoms, published in 1985, where we meet Amalric Anteros, who is a pampered merchant who meets Janos Greycloak, who is a soldier and a magician who claims to know the way to the land of riches and is basically a big old treasure hunt adventure. It's a lot of fun, and it's pretty much a standalone novel because the second novel was written almost 10 years later with The Warrior's Tale, published in 1994, and this is the one I really recommend. It's a story about Amalric's sister, Captain Raleigh Antero, probably the best sapphic high fantasy story I've ever read. Raleigh leads an all-female company of soldiers as they track down the last Archon of Lycance, who holds a doomsday spell that can destroy everyone. The third book in the Antero series is Kingdoms of Night, where we go back to Amalric. And the fourth book, The Return of the Warrior, is a Captain Raleigh adventure where she returns after being thought dead. And this novel was written solely by Alan Cole. All these novels are pretty much standalone stories. You don't need to read them in order. But I think the standouts are the ones with the lesbian heroine, Captain Raleigh. So that ends part 3 of my list of top 100 best fantasy authors ever. Let me know what you think of these authors down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.